So I'm trying to make this task simple enough that even if you're only just understanding it a little bit, that you'll still be okay. What is perspective? Well, it's simply the idea that when something moves away from us, it appears to get smaller. So, if you look at these two objects, you can tell that this is bigger than this. All right? So this is larger than this. But if I move this away from you and I move the cube closer, eventually the cube starts to look bigger. So perspective in drawing is about that idea. When something moves away, it appears to get smaller, right? Small. It's as simple as that. So if you can think about that, right? That's all we're doing with perspective. And the simplest way to show it is to imagine that you're looking out at a landscape and you can see the horizon. And on that horizon, you can imagine the sun might be setting. And let's imagine that there's a highway. You're driving down a highway towards the sun. So on that highway, the highway itself, the road is the same dimension, isn't it? Let's say the road is 7 meters wide. So the road is always 7 meters wide because that's what a road is, you could say. But in a drawing, if I made them the same distance, then it would not look like it was getting smaller. So, perspective is the idea that if, for example, if we were a bird now flying over the world and we saw that highway, okay, and there's our little car driving along the highway with a long shadow because the sun's over here somewhere. Okay, so if we were flying overhead, if we were a bird flying overhead, right, you might see the lines being similar distance because we're on top. But as soon as we look at something that's moving away from us, in other words, this is further away than this, point A is further away than point B. But here, point A and point B are the same distance from the bird. So because they're the same distance, they look the same size to the bird. But if we're in the car and we're driving, point A everything at point A will be smaller than point B. Just imagine there are telegraph poles or wires or something. Let's make it a light. This is a light, okay? There's a light. So those lights will appear to get smaller. And if there was a fence, the fence will appear to get smaller. If there was, let's say it was a train and there was a sort of an overhead cable, right, some sort of something hanging down, you know, then those, or if there was a roof on it, okay, it would all run towards point A. So this is the idea of perspective. Things get smaller when they move away from the drawing or into the drawing. Now, in drawing you can have 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective, 3 point perspective, 4 point perspective, 5 point, etc. Now when you get down to about here, it's very, very, very complex. This is easy, but doesn't look real. This is reasonably easy and looks real. This looks very real, but is harder to draw than this. And this looks more real, but is very hard to draw. So normally most artists will use 2 point or 3 point. So what does this mean? Well, imagine you come to a city and there's a corner. And there's a building on a corner, and you look to the right and you see a street. Well, it's going to run to a vanishing point, isn't it? It's going to run and it's going to appear to get smaller. And if you look to the left, if there's another street, then it will also appear to get smaller, won't it? Just imagine that. Imagine you come to a big city, perfectly straight roads, a big building standing in the corner, and you look in either direction. Those roads will appear to come to a vanishing point. Vanishing point simply means the distances get smaller and smaller and smaller until they eventually touch or look like they touch. Vanish means to disappear. Just look it up in your dictionary. Disappear, right? Or go away. It disappears like magic. So we can draw 2 vanishing points to give us a reasonably correct looking city. So what's 3 point? Well, if you go to the city again, go to the same intersection, and you see a big building, and you look to your left and there's a road, and to the right and there's a road, you could say you've got 2 vanishing points. But imagine you're now standing in front of that tall building and you look up. What happens? You've got another vanishing point. Okay, so if you look up, you would see that the top of the building looks closer together than the bottom. Am I right? So this is an example of 3 point perspective. 1, 2, and 3. Now what if there was a big, like a manhole, and you lifted the lid off the manhole and you looked down and there was a ladder going in, right? And what if you walked over to the edge of that hole and looked down? You would see that at the bottom of that hole it would be smaller, correct? So imagine you're standing there with your little shoes on. Right, looking down at the hole. Right, vanishing point is down here. It's number 4. Okay, so vanishing. This is a 3-point perspective drawing. Can you imagine how difficult it would be to add a 4th point of perspective? Very, very hard. So most artists only do 3. Okay. So that's it. So what we're going to do, we're going to draw basically a city by starting with a horizon line. Then we're going to draw 2 points quite close to the edge of the page, very close to the edge of the page. And then we're going to construct a series of buildings or boxes. And they're either going to have vertical lines or the lines are going to run towards vanishing point 1 and vanishing point 2. And that's it. For example, here's a box, plus it's got some other shapes for the roof, okay? But it's really just a box, isn't it? Vertical, vanishing point 2, vanishing point 1. Okay, and then some more boxes. Vertical, vanishing point 2, vertical, vanishing point 1, vertical, vanishing point 2. Okay, now there's then shadows, but that's another matter. We're talking about the boxes first. So even having a roof like that makes it a bit tricky, but if you build your city out of mainly boxes with some holes in the boxes, it'll be enough. Okay, so this is the technique. Oh, one more thing. It's a good idea to warm up with some straight lines. So I'm going to do a little warm up by practicing drawing some straight lines, because it's really good to be able to draw straight lines without a ruler. So this is my technique. Well, it's not mine. I learnt it. I was taught it. So what I do, or what the idea is to find a direction where you can move your hand where it's not sitting still. So if I put my hand on here, right, and move it, it can only draw a curve. So it's very clear, as soon as you do that, that if I want a straight line, I have to move my wrist. Right, the wrist must move. Okay, so what if I put my elbow on the ground or on the table? We still get a circle, a curve. So it's also clear then that to get a straight line, your elbow must move. So what I'm doing is I'm moving my elbow and my wrist. And if you could see my body, you would see me moving forward a little bit. So my shoulder, okay, my shoulder is kind of moving. Let me see if I can show you what I'm doing. Okay, so that's my head there, isn't it? No, where's my head? Anyway, I don't think I can fit in under the camera, but look, I'm sort of moving my whole body. I don't know if you can see my head. And also notice the direction, right? This direction up here is easier for me than this direction. See how here, what's happening is my elbow is hitting my chest or my ribs, and it's pivoting at my body. Okay. And if I try to draw it this way, it's really hard as well, or harder for me. So for me, the best direction for any straight line is sort of on a 45-degree angle, or a little bit more, so you can try it for yourself. Now if I want a line in this direction, all I do is I turn my paper. If I want a line in that direction, I just turn my paper. If I want a line in this direction, I turn my paper. So by doing that method, I can get reasonably straight lines in any direction on a drawing by turning my paper. And I'm practicing because I'm always drawing roughly in the same direction. So whenever I draw one line, I'm practicing my one straight line. All right. So it's a really good idea. It also warms you up, which is good. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is start with a horizontal line. Now you can use a ruler if you want, just to do this one. If you want, just so it's a little bit, you know, reasonably straight, or you can just sort of do it manually. But do push lightly, because if you push too heavily, then your drawing will just get really messy really fast. So you've got a horizon line. Okay, horizon line. Horizon line means it's a horizontal line that is similar to what we see when we look, you know, across an ocean or a desert. Then I want you to draw one point close to the edge and one point close to this edge. And as long as it's really clear, okay, you can make that a hard point. And then I want you to start to imagine, or you can copy the videos, okay? But I'm going to start to imagine a sort of a sci-fi world. Now remember, the rules are your lines must be either towards vanishing point 2, vanishing point 1, or vertical. Okay, so I'm going to start with a vertical. So I'm just going to put it roughly in the middle, and I'm going to use the edge of my page as a guide. I can see that my page is roughly in that direction. So that might be the edge of my first box. And let's give it a certain dimension, so let's give it a bit of a width. Something like that. Now let me decide, I've already decided I'm going to put this one above the horizon. So I'm going to do a box up here. So remember the rules: vertical, vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2. They're vertical, so these other two lines must go towards each point. So I simply give myself that guideline there, and give myself this guideline here. So that's, you know, I've come a bit low here. This is a bit low. I'll just lift it up a little bit. More like that. All right. So let me make this a floating box. I'm going to make this a science fiction city. Make it a floating box. I'll decide that the bottom of this side of this box is about here. Right. So if it's here, it must go towards this vanishing point. Okay, and if this line crosses this one here, and this is a box, then there must be another line starting here and going towards this vanishing point. About there. Now, if we can see under the box, right, then there must be a line starting where this one crosses this one, and it must run here because it's the only place it can go to. If I do a vertical, well, it's already there. If I do it towards vanishing point 2, well, it's already there. So this corner must have a line that goes in this direction. And then, again, according to your imagination, if we can see all of this underneath, then over in this back corner here, there's another one, and it runs over here. Now, this is where you just want to try to be as careful and as accurate as you can with these early lines. And if you're really nervous, you can get a ruler and just put them in, but put them in really lightly. If you push too heavily, you're going to have problems later. So if you want, you can use a ruler. I don't really mind. Okay. These lines will be vertical. So there's my first box, and it looks really good, if I do say so myself. All right. You know, you can see that under there, that's the most accurate line, and over here, that's the most accurate line. So don't expect your verticals all to line up. Okay, that's probably not going to happen, because you know this is not going to line up with this corner out the back, because this is longer than this. Oh, sorry. Let me do that again. This is not going to line up with this because this is longer than this. So just make sure you follow the rules. If you follow those rules and your lines are reasonably straight, then everything's going to be fine. Okay, so we continue. I could put another one down here. I might as well, because it's an imaginary city. So I'm going to put another one down here, and I'll start the bottom about here. So if this crosses here, if this crosses this here, then it must run over towards here. Okay, now I can decide on how big. Well, let me do something a bit more interesting. I'll make it a bit thinner here, and I'll make it a bit deeper here. But notice vertical lines. Vertical lines. Okay, so let's stop this one, this line about here. So if I want to stop it here, guess what? It has to, if I want it to be horizontal, right, then it must run along here. So if you just keep repeating to yourself, the direction of my 3 lines must be either vertical or towards vanishing point 2 or towards vanishing point 1. If you keep repeating that to yourself, and use your ruler if you can't quite get it, you know. It'd be better to have a few lightly ruled lines than to have really inaccurate lines. Alright, so this one crosses this one here, so let's run this now back to here. And this one crosses this one here, so we need another line from here in this direction. So what I'll do is I'll just erase these lines that I don't need right now, just so it's a bit clearer. You know, you might have to do it twice to get it right. That's pretty good. Okay, and I'll keep going. Let me put another one here somewhere. Let me just get a battery ready because I can see my... I know what to do. I'll keep drawing until my battery runs out, which is probably going to be in 5 minutes. So I'll put another one here. Okay, and again I'm going to work with simple boxes, so I'll start with a vertical. I can put the vertical in any part of the drawing. And just check that it looks vertical. It looks pretty good. And then just imagine what I want. Okay, I'll have a face here, and I'll have this going back into this drawing. So I'll take it up to about this point here, and then this line goes to this vanishing point. Like that. And now from here, this one must go out here. Okay, now the bottom of this side I can choose. Let's put it here. So that the bottom edge runs in that direction. And now I can pick a width. Let me make this one fairly deep. So it might be a good idea to erase the lines you don't need as you go. See how that's a bit clearer? Alright, now let's put in another vertical edge. I can pick any depth I want. What if, in fact, I do that? And then I could bring this horizontally out now, as if there's a little L shape. Let me show you what I mean. Vertical, right, vertical, vanishing point 1, and therefore this goes to vanishing point 2. See that? Now this is a bit tricky. I have to join this line up with this line. So I simply follow it towards this vanishing point. Okay, but I obviously don't draw it all the way through here. So I'm looking for an angle about there. And what we can imagine is it goes through and meets out the back here somewhere. So if this was made of glass, we would see through it. Alright, but we won't do that. That might just confuse you. All right, so we'll do one more and then I think we'll take a break. Let's try something a little bit tricky. Let's put a hole through this. Okay, so I'm going to draw as if there's a big window here. But again, vertical. Start with a vertical. Then vanishing point 1. Okay. Now, because it's a hole, or if it's a hole, we can see into it. So if we can see into it, we've got a vertical here, a vertical in here, and we've got a horizontal here and a horizontal in here. So there must be another line from here, right? And it must go towards this point. Okay, now we can decide how far to put it, or how far it goes. So one way to do that is to follow this line up, across, and down. Up, across towards that vanishing point. And then from where that one crosses that one, we can imagine it going down at the back. See that? So that's the other side of the hole. Look, I think what I'll do is I'm going to show you now how you might add some lines to this to make it a little bit easier. If you're struggling a little bit to understand the idea, or you're just finding it hard to build it on your page, then let me show you next how to give yourself some extra guidelines to help you. So to do this, you just want to do it very faintly, very softly. Okay, so let me move to the other table. That's on, that's on. Yeah, I was just thinking that, some of you will be finding this quite hard. So I wanted to give you a method that makes it a bit easier. And as long as you do this softly, it'll work. Okay, now what I'd like is my mechanical pencil actually. When you are drawing lines like this, it can be good to use a 2B or a 3B because you want these lines to be fairly fairly accurate. And when you go down to a 2B pencil, they're a little bit harder, and so when you sharpen them, they stay sharp a little bit longer. So you can generally get sort of, sharper lines. So I think this is a 2B lead inside what's called a mechanical pencil, but you can use any pencil you've got. And yeah, if you've got a 2B, that'd be good. I'm just going to change this music. Okay, so the idea is to take your ruler and to just add a whole lot of guidelines as softly as you can. Oops. Onto your page, onto your drawing. For example, if I was to construct a few other boxes out here, I know that I'll need some verticals, and I know that I'll need some lines in this direction and some lines in this direction. So you can, if you want, just lightly sketch a series of guidelines. And as long as they're fairly light and they all go through that vanishing point, so if you use your ruler, it'll make that easier. But don't push heavily. It'll be a mess if you push too heavily here. It's actually going to be a bit of a mess anyway because you're adding so many lines. And then do the same on the other side. Now, only put them where you don't already have a line, so there's no need to add them in places where you don't need them. But what this will do, it'll just give you quicker access to the right angles. Then you could do some vertically as well. Now, it's a little bit harder to do it vertically because you don't really have many. You could, well, you could use the edge of your ruler. For example, I could find, right, and I could use that as my master. And then I could just see, if I sit my ruler, the other edge of the ruler on that line, then I can now draw one out the back here. I can draw another one, etc. So again, just giving yourself some options of the verticals. And now in the other direction. So you're really building a little grid for yourself. All right. Now, if you look closely at that, you'll probably be able to see all the lines. But they're not too heavy, so it should be okay. All right, so let me go back now down to this idea here. I was showing you how to, build details, right? So if we wanted to have this window here that goes through, I might just keep using the 2B for a while. Then, as I say, if we follow that vertical line up and across the top, right, again, this is our vanishing point line, and then a vertical from there, it brings us, it sort of shows us the back edge of that. And then if you run this line through there, where it crosses that, that is the start of the window at the back. See that? So that's our little sort of window out the back. All right, now you can, as I said earlier, you can get rid of any of the lines if it starts to get confusing. Just rub them out. That's a common practice with artists, especially comic book artists, is when you're building a drawing, you want to keep your drawing fairly clear so you can see what you're doing. So if you end up with too many lines, just rub some of them out. And maybe make the correct ones stronger. Alright, so you can see there that we built that and it looks fairly convincing, it looks fairly correct. So let's just keep building some other boxes, okay? We can pretty much put them wherever we want. So why don't I put out the back here, because I've got a vertical line right here. Let me just start with that. And I'll just give it some depth. Maybe go out the back to here. Let's go in behind this one. And then let's sit it about here. Okay, so this one goes back to this vanishing point now. Now I've got some guidelines, but not one right there, so because that's a bit tricky, I'll add it in. And let's add one back here now as well. So let's imagine that I bring this box up in there. There's a line. I'll just guess a vertical through here. And I'll take it up to here. Sorry. Okay, so I've just drawn this and I brought it down to here. Now these are almost horizontal here because they are close to the horizon, and that's the effect you get when you're drawing lines close to the horizon. Alright, so let's pop maybe another hole here, or a couple of holes. I'll put one towards the top and one towards the bottom. Let's put one right through the middle here so that we can actually see the horizon out the back. Now I'll make this the same as that, and maybe this same as that out there. And like we did down here, we've just got to imagine the intersection of this vertical and that vanishing point. So the vertical comes down, hits here, and then it runs towards this vanishing point. So let me use my ruler just to clean this up, because it's important to get this correct. What's that one? Now there's one from here, vertical. Okay, no, it's not quite vertical, Shane. And then there's one from here to this vanishing point over here. And you'll notice it's almost horizontal. See that? Let's do another one up here, vanishing point 1. And then from that intersection with the vertical towards vanishing point 2. Okay, now this is an interesting one. Right here we can see that the horizon line runs right, halfway through that little window. Okay, which means we can see the floor and the ceiling. So there's going to be another line running from there back to this other vanishing point. And it's going to be, again, almost horizontal. Just like we got that one to this vanishing point, we've got one here and we got one here. Now we want to build in the depth of that box. So the depth of the box is shown here. See, that's the depth right there, isn't it? So if we make sure we've got that line correct, which we have, then I can draw one from here back along to here. So what I'm actually doing effectively is drawing the bottom of this box, even though we can't see it. Right, so the bottom of the box out the back is there, and it crosses the bottom of the box out the back here, right there. So that line there, vertically, is the depth out the back here. Okay, so then from there, this line goes back to that vanishing point. And this line does the same. And then there's also one down here which is tricky. This is why the ruler will be, where the ruler will be very handy. So I'll just neaten that up a bit with a ruler so you can see it. All right, so can you see that now? So this is the front. Here's the top. Can't see that, can't see that, can't see that. Don't need that anymore. So that's pretty much it. And can you see how it looks like it's behind this one because this is crossing in front? All right, what else can we do? Well, that was pretty complex, okay? That's pretty tricky. You don't have to do something as tricky as that if you don't want to. So let me keep going. Let me add something else. So I've got lead all over the drawing now. So I could just add another one out here somewhere. I've got these verticals, may as well use it. Because this is all just imaginary, okay? So you can do anything you want. Let me bring it down to here. And up to about here. So again, the guidelines are helping me now. And just to make it clearer, rub some of that out. And I'm going to bring this back towards this horizon now. So a line from here all the way back. I don't have a guideline there, so I'll add one. See, again, it's just following those three simple direction rules. All right, and I think I might stop it. I'll stop it just in there. And bring it all the way down. All right, so there's a kind of a big box there. And you can add your details later as you see fit. Okay, we'll get rid of a bit of this, a bit of that. I mean, the more I think about it, you know, I'm very happy if you do want to use your ruler for this, because as long as you don't push too heavily with it, you'll end up with a more accurate drawing. It really does make it much easier to be correct, you could say. Takes more time, but the drawing will be better. Might just shift that back to here. It looks like a piano. All right, what else? Let me put kind of a longish one out the back here. I'll use this line. I'll go vertically up about here. I'll keep it not too high. I'll put it about there for height. Now this is where you have to just decide and make sure you're not gonna, you know, you have to keep thinking what's in front, what's in the back. Okay, so in this instance I want this to be in front of this one. Okay, so I'll stop it about here on that line. Alright, and I'll just hide this now because it's distracting. And I'm going to actually bring it a little bit lower. So I'm just making these decisions as I go. And I'll just make this a little bit lower. Alright, so now that I've got that, I can take this corner and go back here, right? And because this is going to be behind this one, I can bring it up somewhere under here. Alright, now it comes up here, so from here it's going to go back to there. Now just notice that's almost horizontal, so you have to be careful. It's almost horizontal because it's very close to the horizon line. This is the horizon line. This is the horizon line here. The horizon line is where the vanishing points are. So okay, so we can keep going. Let me put something out the back here and let me make it sort of quite tall and thin. So I'll put it about here, vertical. And I'll actually bring it all the way down the bottom and up the top. So I'll make this some sort of a, I don't know, a tube or something. Very tall, quite thin. So it could be some sort of a, just like a rectangular panel. So I'll make it a little bit wider in this direction. Can you see that? So it's running out the back of everything. And you know, that's it. That'll do for now. It's just some sort of an object out the back or a building out the back. Now this one looks a bit too heavy. Why don't I put some holes in this? Let me show you actually how to do an ellipse or a tunnel. So if you want a hole like a railway tunnel hole to go through a box, okay, you imagine that if you could see the hole flat, it would be a circle. Right, so where it hits the box is a circle. So if there's a hole through there, the first thing we see is a circle, but in perspective, we'll see an ellipse, right? So all we have to do is draw an ellipse on here and just make sure that it's in the correct direction. So an ellipse on here is roughly that. So the direction of the cylinder or the tunnel or the hole is through there towards that vanishing point. Can you see that? So the minor axis is in this direction. So all I have to do is do an ellipse on here where the minor axis heads towards that vanishing point. I could put it here, or here, or here, as long as the minor axis is running in that direction. See that direction there? Now it's harder than it looks. We could put 3 in. Let me try to draw 3. Now to draw 3, I really should give myself a bit of a guide, so they're all going to be the same size. But what I'm aiming for, remember, is the minor axis. To be in that direction. In other words, the shortest part of my circle, of my ellipse, runs like this. Let's make this one smaller, because and this one smaller. It looks too forced. Tilt it a bit less. Okay, that's a bit better. Looks like a speaker, doesn't it? I might just erase the bottom one and just have 2 ellipses up there, and down here I'll do something else. So I'll just start with that. So if that's the case, if they're holes, then I could put some sort of a road going through it, right? Let's imagine now there's a road. It's coming through that hole and heading across my drawing. Like a highway in the sky. Alright, it might look something like that. And now let me just try to neaten that up a bit. I think I've said to you before that ellipses are perhaps the hardest shape to draw by hand. Now what I could even do here, I could make this sort of have a kind of a flat top to it. Again, using my vanishing points. So it's some sort of little thing. I mean, you know, because of what I'm asking you to do, it's really just to play, okay? So science fiction gives you the freedom to play, so you can make these buildings any shapes you want, really, as long as they follow 2-point perspective. All right, and then you might add a couple more, you know, one up here maybe. Let's put one in here. Now, also I want to introduce you to the idea of doing something that's not quite a perfect box. So for example, if you wanted something that had an angle to it, if you go carefully and slowly, you should be able to figure it out. So if I wanted this to be vertical at the back, but then to have a slanted roof, then I can just decide where does it, you know, where's the other wall? Let me put the other wall out the back about here. So I just want the slant to maybe start here and to finish there. So I just draw a straight line between them. So it's as if there's, you know, a little slant. All right, what else could we do with that idea? We could put we could put a shape on here. What if we put a cone on here, or a sphere? We could even put a sphere on here. So what we could do is let's make it a cone. In fact, I'll make it a pyramid. Pyramids are a bit simpler. We'll start with the base of the pyramid as if it's stuck to the side. So again, vertical, vanishing point 2, vanishing point 2. So that can be sort of like the base of the pyramid. And then we can imagine the center of the pyramid by drawing 2 diagonals. And then, if there was a line running from the base of the pyramid to the tip of the pyramid, it would run towards this vanishing point. So this is an imaginary vertical line up the center of the pyramid. And then all I have to do is choose a length, let's make it about there, and I just join up these 4 corners. So the first base corner is right there. Second one is there. And the third one is back there. And the fourth one goes down to the base there. Now if I just neaten that up a bit, you should see a little 4-sided pyramid shape sticking out from the side of that box. See that? And then of course you could imagine a bit of tone to help us define that. So you can add some other slightly more interesting or complex shapes if you want, but I'm also happy if you just want to stick to the boxes, it's fine. Let's add another road. Let's put a little road from here, or another highway. And I'll drop it over to that side a bit. So just drawing what's visible. Maybe about that wide. So it's a little imaginary road or highway. The advantage of that is, later on you can add a few imaginary cars. So we could just open that up a bit, zoom in. So we could later on try to imagine how big a car would be. So this is where making a city like this look a bit realistic, it'll really come from those little details. So if this is a highway, let's say there are 2 lines of traffic, 1, 2. So if I was to put a little science fiction car on here, it might sort of be about, that big. Pretty small, right? And you could just imagine there are quite a few, and of course they're going to get a bit smaller. Right down to here they're going to be tiny. And you could even put a tiny little center line down the middle if you wanted. Alright, so that's how you might add a little bit of scale. You could even add some sort of letters or something, like building numbers. You could put a little A here or something. like a science fiction A. Or you could add, you know, a billboard or something. You know, some sort of detail. Okay, now what you can probably see on my drawing is it's starting to get a little bit hard to see because I'm adding so much information. So I reckon you want to get to the point where you've got about 10 sort of structures. You know, that should be a minimum, I think. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8. You know, I'll add a couple more. So I'll put a longish one. In fact, I might put a really big one down the bottom. Let me put a big one down the bottom but out the back a bit. So I'm imagining it first, and then I'll just add a few lines that I need, right? One there. One out there. Now you have to be careful not to come too far forward. If I come too far along here, it won't be possible. It won't work. So I have to stop it back about maybe about here, I think. In fact, I'll stop it about there. So I'm just sort of tucking a little, well, it's quite large because it's a fair way away from us, but it's reasonably small in the drawing. Because it's sort of in behind things. See, as soon as if you get the ruled line in the wrong direction, it really looks bad. That's better. So I'm tucking that in just behind everything else. And I'm going to decide how high to bring it up. So I'm going to bring it up through there. So I'm just going to imagine the top of it being about there. And therefore I can bring the front of it down. And that's the front, right? Vertical, horizontal. So then there's another one from here out the back here. And then, you know, I just have to sort of try to imagine if this goes up and that goes across, then about there. Yeah, the back corner's about here somewhere. So that'll do. So it's quite a busy area in there, but I think that's a long way away, that one. So let me do one more, maybe over here. I'll do some sort of fairly flat one. Vertical here, vertical there, vertical over here. There's already a guideline. And then another one from about there. Then that starts to come together. Now just one at the bottom here. and then one across here. Again, I'm pushing a little bit heavily, too heavily, so I've got to watch that. So you can see this one, it's out the back. It doesn't exactly look like it's out the back because, you know, there's no tone to help us see it, but that will be further out the back. Good. I might put one more of those down here somewhere, just for fun. Sort of a fairly slim. And after a while, the rule of, you know, direction, the direction rule will become a little bit easier for you, I think, hopefully. Then you can sort of play with your shapes. So this one's just kind of popping up there. Alright, so I think I should rub out a few lines now. And when you've got it pretty much established, you could even rub out your horizon line, because it's not an actual line in the space one. In your, if you're doing a city one, a normal city one, you can leave, you will see part of your horizon line in the background, so you can leave it in that drawing. But if you're doing this kind of futuristic one, you can get rid of it. Now you might want to rub out lightly some of your existing lines just to help you see through the mess. As long as you don't rub them out altogether, you can make them stronger in a minute. Okay, so once you've done a fair bit of erasing, that's when you can then sort of go back in and clean your lines up. So just check that you're happy with the structure. You could add, for example, a few more windows or holes or doorways. You know, make it interesting to you. Try not to make it too simple. Oh, I can see there's a mistake there. Good that I started to use the ruler, or I wouldn't have noticed it. Alright, so, you know, it's not bad. I could add a little pipe or something. Why don't I add a... Let me change this. I'm going to change this because I don't like the way it's falling at the bottom. So I'm going to change it quite dramatically by adding a kind of a curve here, which I haven't done yet. So it's some sort of a, you know, an entrance ledge or something. Vertical's a bit off. So what I want to do is sort of track that back from that corner through there, and I just want to sort of estimate where this is. So this, see, if you look at that, right, it's sitting back there, right? So I can sort of imagine that that is about here. So that line is about here. It's a bit of a guess, but it's okay. So that means my curve sort of goes up about there and sort of comes out. So I know this is a bit tricky, but you don't have to do this level of detail. I'm just adding it because I was thinking mine was a bit simple. In fact, I'll bring this over a little bit more. That's a little bit. Some of my verticals are not vertical. Alright, so that's what we've ended up with, this strange little whatever it is, like an entrance to a building or something. I could add a little opening. As if you can walk inside here or fly inside. Maybe it's a big service station for the, put some lights on here or something. You know what I mean? Just some little thing. I could put a number on here or a letter. Alright, don't really like that detail. I might get rid of that. There you go, that'll do. So hopefully you can see that. And then, you know, what if there was a pole coming out? We could have a little hole here, like a tunnel or a window. Again, the minor axis would be running in that direction. And then it might come out. And then it might turn and go down. You know, some sort of a strange pipey pole thing. Bit too thin, Shane. And you can imagine that it's a cylinder, so I could add a few ellipses to shape it as it goes down. Something like that. Alright, so look, you know, something as detailed or as complex as that is more than enough. Might add another set of windows. So to add windows, again, you've just got the direction. Get your direction right. And then just add a few verticals. And if they are windows, maybe you can see into them a little bit. See that? Now they're not exactly in the right position. I've been a bit loose, but that's okay. Pop a little hole here. Or another pyramid. Let me put another pyramid shape. So put the base there, the box for the base, find the center. Go up in height, or from the bottom of the pyramid out towards this vanishing point. I know that's confusing, but it's true. Pick a height, say there, and then just join up those four sides. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you're kind of drawing it as if it's glass, as if you can see through it. If you draw it as if you can see through it, then the structure will be correct. You know, just making it a bit neater. Alright, so I think I might stop the structure there and spend a little bit of time just talking about tone. Now, I don't want you, or don't need you to add a lot of tone, but I do want you to just establish the 3 different values of each box. So you want to pick a light source or a direction, and then you want to add, you know, let's say 2 values, one for the other. You know, let's say this is the front here, right? Let's call that one value, second value, and then the third value would be under here, right? You can't see an underside here. So this might be the easiest. 1, 2, 3 values, right? So the darkest would be under here. I'm going back to my 6B now. Now, what you'll find as soon as you start adding tone, it's going to get harder to see your lines. So you just have to work carefully. And you could also increase the strength of your lines as soon as it gets confusing. Okay, so now I'm going to add a slightly lighter tone here. And notice that I'm doing it flat. And I could build up this one a little bit more. So then I can sort of imagine that in here it's maybe darker. Like a typical building would be. Okay, and then I don't really like my windows. I'm just going to rub those out. So it's a little bit, my mistakes are a little bit less obvious. So this is an example of as soon as you add tone, you're going to lose your lines. So you want to go back about now and strengthen them. Now you can use a pencil, or if you want, you could use a fine liner, an ink pen. Either way is fine. But you don't want to lose your structure. You've gone to all that trouble now, so you don't want to lose that by adding tone. And you don't have to use the ruler for this, but you might find it a little bit quicker. But just make sure you're happy. You know, you've got your lines in the right direction, in the right position first. I'll just do this manually. Now, with tone, to show volume, you just have to keep thinking of those 3 different values. All right, we've got sort of 3, 2, and 1. So every time I add something to my drawing with tone, every time I add tone, I have to be getting that correct. And they should look different to each other. So tone value number 1 should be different to tone value number 2, and tone value number 2 should be different to tone value number 3. And then if you look inside those windows, you know, we can choose to make them a little bit glassy by having some sort of diagonal lines, or you could make them look more like holes. That's really up to you. But see, that's starting to come together now, isn't it? We get a sense that the light's over here and it's sort of above. You know, it could be the moon off to the side, or the sun. So then here, right, this must be number 1, this must be number 2, and underneath here would be 3. But we can't see it down here. So we then decide, okay, well, if this is the same as that, then maybe this one is just a little bit darker than this one. So we could maybe make this one, you know, a stop between the two, a halfway between. Okay, so again, you want to build it up. Try to keep it flat. And as soon as you start to lose your lines, you want to go back and make them a bit darker. And notice that I'm using the side of my pencil, because that's the best way to build tone, is with the side of your pencil, not the end of your pencil. Get rid of my number 2. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, so it's good to build your tone slowly. Okay, and we're starting, we'll lose it pretty soon, so I'm going to add just a little bit of tone up the top. And I'm going to make this a little bit darker. And it doesn't mean you can't, you know, this side here could be a little bit darker than that one. You could imagine it's a colour, slightly different tone. Alright, and now this is getting a bit messy, so I'm going to go in and add slightly stronger lines. It's quite easy to make a mistake with a ruler, just like it is to make a mistake without a ruler. So, like I say, be careful if you're using a ruler. Just go easy. Alright, so one thing to notice here is, as soon as I do the box lines like that, that little highway is getting lost. So I may as well grab it now and just make it stronger. And you can think about, as the lines do go well into the distance towards the horizon, you can think about them being a little bit lighter. There's a thing called atmospheric perspective, and what that is you know, when you look at mountains in the distance, they're a little bit softer. They're not as dark, and that's because of the atmosphere. So as the line gets further away, you can make it a little bit lighter. All right, so this is it. This is how we build it up. Now, one more thing I think to mention is cast shadows. To really make this look real, you're going to have some cast shadows. So for example, the light that's hitting here is going to come in out the back and cast a shadow, right, somewhere, maybe like that. See what I mean? It's as if the light's coming from about that angle. It's coming around the back under there, and this is a big open area, so we can see a little cast shadow there. And that just helps it look realistic. We could also put a little cast shadow under the highway. We could imagine the highway is a little bit up off the ground. Add a little cast shadow like that. And you could add a little bit more detail to your little cars. Alright, so that's kind of it. You know, something like this is what I'd like you to do. So cast shadows. Now, when you've got many objects, you will have some boxes casting shadows on other boxes. So see if you can suggest that. So for example, if there's a cast shadow in under there, then this object might cast a shadow on here. So if we try to match that angle, and then we bring it over to this corner, we can sort of imagine that the sun might in fact cast a little shadow on the top here. So let's do that. Let's just for fun position a little shadow that sort of falls about here from there. So basically you could run it that way for that edge, and then from here you could run it back towards this other vanishing point. So that back corner could have a cast shadow on it from here. In fact, it wouldn't be that long, would it? It would only go to there, and then it would drop back. Okay, so this line comes down to there, and then this line comes down to there. Now it wouldn't have sharp edges because it's a long distance, but it's a bit like, you know, a cloud casting a shadow on the ground from the sun. You know, shadows do travel long distances, they just don't end up with harsh edges. So because of that, this area here, this side must be darker. So that's when we need to build this up now. So what I'd like you to do is firstly get, you know, about 10 boxes, you could say, in your city, or 10 buildings. Add a little bit of detail, Make sure that your perspective is correct, and then add a little bit of tone. And once you start adding your tone, be sure to increase the strength of your lines so we don't lose, so we can see your city. We won't be able to see it if the tone is too strong for the lines, and you need some tone to make it look three-dimensional. So it's a bit of a balancing act. I'll just put a little bit here to show you. Once you get the hang of this, it's actually quite simple and fun. But it is tricky at the start. You've got to make sure you understand the principle. And following those three direction rules is the simplest way to do it, I reckon. All right, I think I better stop there. That's almost time.